have ruled that when a reasonable individual feels that he is no longer free to leave of his own volition, that constitutes a custodial arrest. So we're trying to establish those facts in the record. Now, the fourth thing you can ask is very simple, or the fourth statement, actually. Officer, is there a recording being made of this incident? And generally, they're going to tell you yes. And say, okay, then for the record, what I would like to tell you is, one, I am not engaging in transportation or commercial use of the highways in any way, shape, or form. Two, I absolutely do not consent to being stopped for those purposes or any other purposes unless you can show that I've violated some law other than allegedly a transportation law. By doing that, we're actually setting the stage for the argument that the officer was fully informed that he was attempting to regulate me in a manner that was inappropriate. I was not acting in the regulable activity of transportation or commerce, therefore his authority to act under those statutes didn't exist. It's very much like someone trying to hold you accountable under a commercial fishing statute when you live in Iowa and you've never been to the coast to commercially fish in your life.
Well, in your experience, I mean, I would imagine this would catch a lot of officers completely off guard and by surprise. Are they more likely to listen and do they get more angry, or do they listen to you?
That actually entirely depends upon the officer. Nowadays, you just don't know.
That's why I asked. I would imagine some of them would get a little...
Yeah, some of them will get agitated. They'll get downright angry in some cases simply because you are attempting to enforce your rights. They're going to start making demands. I told you I wanted your license, registration, and proof of insurance. But again, officer, one, I believe I'm in a custodial arrest because I'm not free to leave. Two, is any of that information that you can use to either further charge me or use against me in a court of law? Now, the officer's going to he's really going to explode at this point, at least as far as an attitude, simply because he's used to being obeyed without question.
Sure.
That's what they want you to be. They want you to be submissive. They want us to be sheeple. And I decided a long time ago I was no longer going to be that. And
what about when they ask, they always want permission to search your vehicle?
Again, use of the term vehicle, I would not recommend.
Okay.
Search my car, search my conveyance, automobile, sure, but not a vehicle. Again, vehicle is a commercial term related to transportation. But as far as the power to search, again, this is a warrantless arrest, therefore it would be a warrantless search. What is the officer's articulable probable cause to conduct that search? The courts will allow the officer to search what they consider to be the passenger compartment of an automobile if you're inside the car to ensure that the officer is safe from any attack by a weapon you may have hidden, which is my general rule and reason for when I'm pulled over, I immediately look for a private parking lot, a private driveway, somewhere other than the shoulder of the road to pull over. That serves multiple purposes. The first one being it does not give the officer the authority to tow the automobile. The only way he can tow the automobile is if he can show that it was obstructing the public traffic or was being seized for evidence.
Let me ask you this. What if it takes you a while to find that point when they accuse you of running from the police officer? I mean...
I turn on, if I know I don't have a place where I can pull over immediately, then I will turn on my flashers. I will decelerate my car to a point where there's no question that I'm not attempting to evade anyone.
Yeah,
I will wave in the rearview mirror and acknowledge it, and I'll be pointing off the side of the road to let them know that I'm just looking for a safe place to pull over.
That sounds good.
If you do that, then they're going to have a very tough time saying that you made an attempt to evade the police.
Sure.
And, of course, their dash cam will show that
yeah, you're not going 80 miles an hour around the corner.
It'll show exactly what the speed is because the camera's recording all that. It will also show that you are waving acknowledgement to the officer and that you signaled him that you're going to pull over. So they're going to have a very hard time with their own video proving that you made no attempt to evade.
Okay, speaking of video, more and more people are taking cameras with them. They're driving with cameras or their cell phones, and they're capturing the police officers, you know, conducting their searches. And they, often enough, they will tell you, hey, turn off that camera. You can't have that camera on. What do you say to that?
I'd say if this is a public place. You are conducting an official duty, and I have every right to tape you in the performance of your official
and they've
duties.
got their dash cams, you know, recording and other recording devices recording
Right.
every
See,
moment.
that's evidence they can alter later. If you have possession of evidence they can't touch, they can't fix that if they screw up during the stop.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's move to on foot. You're walking across the street, you're on a street corner, officer comes up to you, starts questioning you. You know, what's your name? What are you doing standing around here? Now what?
Officer, what's the purpose of this interrogation? Am I under any lawful obligation to respond or answer your questions? And let him know right up front that this is not going to be just an easy mark of, I want, you give.
What if they want your identification and you don't have it, and they tell you that it's law, you're supposed to have identification with you at all times?
Then the officer is intentionally and knowingly misstating a law, and he is abusing the authority of his office. There are penal code statutes against that in Texas. They are abuse of official capacity, official oppression, and official misconduct. And they can, in some cases, result in the officer being prosecuted for felony acts. The abuse of official capacity, especially because the level of the offense is actually charged based upon the monetary value of all of the equipment he is using to commit that crime. So once he passes $1,500, it becomes a state jail felony. And we all know that police cruiser is way more than $1,500.
Mm-hmm.
So he runs the very serious risk of committing crimes even when he doesn't know it. But we need to know it so we know how to make the charge.
So you're actually using their own laws against them. I mean, later, this is something that once you record everything or you know the proper things to say, this is evidence that we could use later in court. Because I'm thinking, what a lot of times, you know, what do we do once we receive a summons or that we get ticketed, and then we're our rights at that point?
Well, our rights at that point are, one, to know whether or not we've been lawfully summoned. We also need to know what the ticket does and does not create a duty upon us for. The ticket is not a summons. A summons, by definition, is a judicial process, and a police officer is an executive officer. He has no authority to issue a summons. What it actually can be considered to be is simply an agreement that, hey, I will let you go if you will promise to appear in front of a judge later rather than forcing me to take you right now, which is the mandate if they do take you into custody. They're required by law to immediately take you before a magistrate. They normally will not do that. If an officer takes you directly to jail and there is no particular reason for him not to act with due diligence, such as an ongoing riot, an ongoing natural disaster, things of that nature, he is duty-bound to immediately take you before a magistrate, because the officer never has the authority to incarcerate. He only has the power of arrest. Only a magistrate or judge can issue a commitment order ordering the incarceration of an individual in Texas, and pretty much any other state.
Wow, wow. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the unconstitutional, all the checkpoints that the federal agents have all across the country now. And a lot of these are border checkpoints, but they're 100 miles inland, or they're 100 miles away from the border itself. So you come driving up, and then they ask you, they want to know if you have any fruit or vegetables. They want to look in the trunks of your cars, and they want to search your vehicles, you know. So what do you do at this point? You pull up to a checkpoint. They ask you where you're going.
Where I'm going does not appear to be any of your business.
And then they want to search the trunk of your car.
Permission denied. I will not consent to a search unless you can give me articulable probable cause and you have a warrant.
Now, we have seen some examples. There was a pastor from Phoenix, Arizona. He was driving through Southern California, and he was stopped several times, and he videotaped himself. And he gave a pretty sterling example of how to protect your rights. And he reacted just exactly what you're saying right there. And they eventually let him go. But there was an instance, and I don't know what city it was in, but they actually had a standoff for 2 hours. And they demanded that he would exit his vehicle. He refused to do so. And it got to the point where they broke the windshield, drug him out, tased him. He cut his face up on the concrete and on the broken glass. And now he has a lawsuit. So what do you think about it? Have you heard about that? And what do you think about that?
Right. I have. And that, again, goes back to what we discussed earlier about you never know the type of individual you're up against. You need to take very careful precautions in the people that you're dealing with wearing these uniforms, because they are literally looking to staff law enforcement agencies with psychopaths. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. They want people with no morals, no conscience, no ability to question, follow orders because we enjoy the result of those orders, which is to inflict pain and harm upon others and control them. And they're really, in a lot of areas, they're weaning out the officers that would resist the urging of the higher-ups to do those sorts of things, and replacing them with those that will do so unquestioningly. I know most folks aren't very much, as far as, at least the ones that tend to listen in the Patriot community, a lot of them are atheistic in nature and don't believe in God, but I do. And I'm one of these people that I'm watching the book of Revelations unfold before my eyes at every opportunity, because everything it tells us is coming. You can see it.
Absolutely.
And people are not recognizing it for what it is. They think it's just people being bad to people, when in fact it is the epitome of we fight not against people but against powers and principalities. And that's really what's going on in this world. And because of that, those powers and principalities are looking for those that support it without question. And so these earthly offices that we've developed for these people, they're going to use those. And I've used to teach in my Bible study class at the homeless shelter in Nacogdoches, where I'm from, that everything in Revelations will be brought about through the guise of world politics. Everything. And we're seeing the result of that right now.
Well, speaking of hell on earth, I wanted to talk about the TSA. They have announced that they are expanding their Viper program. It's now going to include, you know, bus terminals, train stations, and even roadside checkpoints of commercial vehicles. So now we're actually at the point in America where you could be, you know, it's the time where you're going to take your family to a bus station. You're going to want to get on a bus, and they're going to want to grope you and your kids before you get on a bus. I mean, what are you prepared to do? How do you tell them, no, there's no way I'm going to get on that bus and allow you to do this?
Well, again, we only have the rights we're willing to fight for, and fight not being a literal usage in this case, but to stand up and have recognized. You say it's a Viper program. I would say that actually stands for very invasive procedures exercised relentlessly, because as long as we let them, they're going to continue to expand this method of operation.
Absolutely.
But there's absolutely no lawful authority for it. The federal government cannot create a power they never possessed, and they certainly can't create one we did not give them.
Can you sue a TSA agent individually?
You can.
You touch my kids, I'm going to sue you.
You can. The problem you have is how the Congress has set up the ability to do that, such as in Jesse Ventura's case. Alex originally asked me about that the first time I was on the show, and I hadn't got to research it as thoroughly as I should have before I responded to him. But the point is that when they filed suit in Jesse Ventura's case, his law